for the most part, or even just who's going to be like the top guys in next year's class, I don't hear Drew's name a whole lot. I hear it a little bit, but not as much as I think his name should be heard after what happened last year. Now, I don't know whether or not if I didn't watch Penn State football all year like I did because of doing the post game, that I would maybe I'd share their opinion. But since I watched a lot more of Drew than the normal person outside of Penn State who's not a fan, I really got to see a heck of a talent and somebody that I could just tell is headed in the right direction. There's so many things to like about him. We talked about he's that type of player where when he makes the bad play, like the worst play of the game for him, he comes right back on the next series and marches right down the field and probably puts his best series behind him, which is very rare to do for a young kid who's really, I even know it's his second year. It was his breakout year, but still talked about the mobility difference, unbelievable night and day from year one to year two. So you just think that's going to get better. If he had, and who knows, now that he's got better receiver, I know Warren, but now that you've got three quality wideouts that he did not have last year, and maybe one of, if not the best offensive line in college football, I can see him actually having the same type of bounce that he had last year. And if he does, he'll be consensus number one pick.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any player in college football who has more to gain this year than Drew Aller, if you're talking solely from the NFL. Because like you said, if he comes out and puts together the type of season he's capable of, he could easily lock down 1-1 next April, right? So, yeah, I'm with you because you mentioned how people don't follow Penn State closely. And it's true because unfortunately, what were his two worst games last year? Ohio State and Notre Dame over their two biggest games. Ohio State and then Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal.
You're right. Yeah.
Even against Boise, if you just box scored that game, I mean, there were 4 or 5 just incredible throws he made that were dropped by the receivers. So I think, you mentioned the receivers, and yes, Tyler Warren's gone, and he did so much for this team. But I do think the fact that last year, everybody knew you had to focus on Tyler Warren. Everybody put their entire effort on Tyler Warren, and the receivers still couldn't make plays. That was just so detrimental. So this year, now that you have receivers, you expect to make plays. You're not going to have one guy replace Tyler Warren, but you can have a group of guys replace him. You mentioned that offensive line. I'd argue they've got the best running back room in the country as well, at least the best top with Singleton and Allen. I think there's a big jump there to be made. And again, this team can win in a lot of different ways, but they're going to go as far as Drew's going to take them, because last year against Notre Dame, when Drew had his worst game of the season, they came up 3 points short of playing for a national championship. It's going to be the same way this year. You get into the quarterfinals, the semifinals, you're playing at Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, whoever it may be, Drew's going to have to play well for them to win that game. Even if it's like Notre Dame, because look at Notre Dame. Nicholas Singleton had the game of his life, and everyone forgets about it because of how that game ended. But Nick Singleton was on another level in that game against Notre Dame last year. But in the end, it didn't matter because when they needed the passing offense to come through, it didn't come through, and that's what cost him. That's everybody remembers. So I think there's more there for him. I also think being in year 2 in Andy Kotelnicki's offense is very important, right? His first 2 years as a starter, you had 2 different offensive schemes.
Good point.
So, now to be year 2 with Andy Kotelnicki, I think that's very important because it's like any offense or any defense. Year 2, there's always more you can unlock because the players are more familiar and whatnot, right? So I think that's going to be vital for them as well this year with Drew. And they're going to go as far as he takes them, but I think there's reason to believe that he can put it together. And, you mentioned his ability to bounce back, because last year, you and I came on and talked about all the time. USC, he looked lost in the first half, and in the second half, single-handedly takes over that game, brings them back to win. The Minnesota game, right before halftime, they're down. It looks like, man, they're going to get upset here. And he marches them down the field right before the half to score. And even though Minnesota still led at halftime, that drive right before the half gave them the momentum going into the half. Penn State took over in the second half, coming back and wins. He was so good at that last year, even against Oregon. Early on was struggling through that pick 6 where Oregon went up 28-10, and then the rest of the game until the last drive when he got intercepted. But that wasn't even – I don't even put that on him. He was just trying to force the play because there was 2 minutes left. They needed to make a play. He was tearing that defense apart. So he is very good at that. And why I'm mentioning that again after you said it is I think not just losing in the semifinal, but the way they lost by 3 points, field goal on the last play. the interception he threw that set that up when they were in a position to at worst go to overtime.
Yeah.
I think that's going to fuel him. I'm sure it has all off season. It's going to into the season to just bounce back, turn it around, prove people wrong. And the thing is with Drew, look at this quarterback class last year in the NFL draft. You mean tell me if Drew didn't declare he wouldn't have been, if not a second round pick. He left life-changing money on the table to come back to Penn State and make one. Obviously he's getting paid handsomely to come back, but he left generational money on the table to come back and make one last run at this. A lot of these guys did. And, I know this is a comparison a lot of people have made, but look, 2 years ago, it was Michigan who everybody came back to make one more run at it. Look what happened. Last year, Ohio State, everybody comes back to make one more run at it. Look what happened. And now this year, that team's Penn State. So that's not to say they're going to win the national championship. I think they're very capable of it. I think this is the best team they've had since 1999, the last time they were preseason number one. But I think that has a lot of these guys, Drew leading the charge, just driven. If they weren't hell-bent on winning a national championship at Penn State, there are a lot of guys, him at the front and center of it, who left a lot of money on the table to come back for one more year of college.
I tell you what, maybe this is as good a time as any to take a look at the depth chart. Of course, Tucker does a great job with the depth chart. It's not easy in college, though, especially this time of year. So what do you, is just taking a look at the depth chart, and we'll break down everything later. But just taking a look at the depth chart, do you see anything out of place regarding players that should be starting, players that should be, number two, that kind of thing?
I think really offensively, the only thing is a right tackle. Once Anthony Donk is back healthy, he's going to be your true starter.
Okay.
But Nolan Rucci's still going to play starter minutes, especially how well Rucci. Last year you could make an argument from the Big Ten championship game on, Rucci was their best offensive lineman. So Rucci's going to play. Yeah. But Donkey was probably their best offensive lineman before he tore his knee against Minnesota. So you're not, but again, hey, that's a good problem to have. And those are the things you need to have. If you're going to have the type of season like they think they can, you need to be able to roll 3-4 deep comfortably at offensive tackle, because it's the offensive line. Injuries are going to happen. Or if nothing else, you want to keep guys fresh, because that was one thing last year I think really benefited them in the playoff, was being able to rotate comfortably 6, 7, 8 offensive linemen, 6, 7, 8 defensive linemen. When you got to the playoff, those guys at the top of the depth chart had a little less tread than some others did, and that helped them really push SMU and Boise around, and they pushed Notre Dame around for most of that game too, and just coughed it up at the end. But yeah, I think, like I said, once Donk is healthy, he'll be the starter right tackle, but you're going to see a lot of Nolan Rucci.
And what is the status of Donka? And any other players that may or may not be ready for week one?
As far as I know, the belief is everyone who had anything done in the offseason would be ready for week one. Now, you start the year with Nevada, Villanova, and
Cupcake City.
Yeah, and then you have a bye week, and then you get Oregon. Those first 3 games into a bye week, I don't know how much you're going to see of some of these guys to make sure they're 100% healthy and nice and fresh for the whiteout against Oregon.
Yeah,
it is. It's going to be treated like the NFL preseason. They're going to play some, because you don't want Oregon to be the first game of the year. They're not going to rust off. But you're probably not going to see a lot of these guys for more than a quarter or a half in most of these games. And again, I think that's part of the thing. If you're Penn State, this schedule couldn't set up much better. You have 3 absolute cupcakes and a bye week to get ready for Oregon.
Yeah, and better not lose that one then under that scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the defensive side, and we already, I already know that we're going to have to remove Max Granville. Yes. And we'll move him down here. There's usually a little spot down here somewhere with I guess there's nobody currently injured or anything like that. So he'll be the first one. So who else? Does anybody else look out of place on defense?
I think the only real thing I would change is Anai White is a guy who I don't see him in the 2 deep. He came in with a lot of hoopla from Texas A&M because he's a former 5-star recruit from Philly. But
he's up here.
Yeah, Jalen Harvey is definitely ahead of him at defensive end, because I think this year you're going to see Dennis Sutton and Fisher are definitely your starters, and then after that, Kemba Joe and Jalen Harvey will be the next 2 off the bench at defensive end. And I think you may see a little bit of Malachi Williams mixed in there as well. But otherwise, I think the only other real I think linebacker, again, you don't know. Some of it's going to depend on the system. Rather, Amari Campbell is a quote-unquote starter, but he's going to play a lot.
Does that mean DeLuca could be the co-starter with Rojas?
Yeah, but again, I think a lot's just going to depend on opponent matchup too. Like,
Okay.
you're going to run a different defense against Oregon than you're going to run against Iowa. Against Iowa, you're going to be more of a traditional 3 linebackers because we know you're going to run the ball at us. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But the one other name I would mention though for defensive tackle is I would definitely put Owen Wafel on there, a transfer from Michigan. He will be a redshirt freshman, had a really strong spring, and seems like he'll be in a position to potentially get some reps at defensive tackle this year. But other than that, I think that's pretty spot on for how things are going to look once the fall rolls around.
Okay, so that would be this kid here, Owen Wafel. Okay, yeah. So add Owen, and where do you believe he should be?
Defensive tackle. Maybe not necessarily in the 2 deep, but Deion Barnes likes to rotate 5, 6, 7 guys in if he can. So he's definitely going to be a kid who I would expect to see some playing time this year.
Okay, and he could just be put in anywhere.
That's what I would say, yeah. Because again, I think your defensive tackle, the majority of the heavy lifting is going to be Durant, Ford, and Gilliam. But I think whenever, hey, right before the half, you try to spell guys or the game's starting to get lopsided, Wafel's going to be him, and Andrews and Cook are going to be 3 you're going to see getting a lot of run there. So,
okay, meaning that you would actually move Blanding down.
Yeah. Probably. I'm trying to think.
So you would have Cook, Andrews, and Wafel.
Yeah, I think Cook, Andrews, Wafel, and probably even Gilliam. They're all kind of they're thrown together. You know what I mean? That's your next wave. Those are the guys that in a year or 2 you're going to be expecting more from, but you still will probably see some of them this year.
Okay, got it. Move down, Blanding. Got it. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at. Actually, that's what we're going to do now is actually pop up the transfer board. So let's start first of all. Tell you what, let's start first of all with the guys who departed, because it's very interesting that the receiving unit, what a big change. I mean, the complete new 3. You've got one graduation, but you've got Wallace and Evans out, as you can see here, and then replacing them. We'll get to the guys in just a little bit. So I don't know if the timing of this, obviously you do, but was this something where Penn State was looking to make wholesale changes to the unit, or did they lose a couple of guys and needed to replace them, as well as maybe add a guy or 2?
They were going to add 2 or 3 portal receivers regardless of what happened with the kids who are already here. I think that now Trey Wallace is one. Don't twist. Nobody can twist it. They would have loved to have kept Trey Wallace. They would have. But they also weren't going to bend over backwards to keep him, knowing what they wanted to do to the room and the fact they were going to bring in 2 or 3 guys already anyhow, which they wound up doing. Omari Evans is one who, I mean, he made some splash plays at times last year for Penn State, but I know there was also some concerns in the locker room about his attitude. From my understanding, he's very much a nothing is ever Omari's fault kind of guy.
Okay.
Right down to that interception against Notre Dame where, it wasn't a good decision by Drew, but that was just a terrible route, and he made no effort to try and break the pass up either. So, they would have been on board with keeping Trey Wallace, but even if Trey Wallace sticks around, they were bringing in 2 or 3 transfers regardless. And part of it is just needing to change the entire culture of that wide receiver room, which I think with the transfers they brought in, some of the young guys who were there and some of the guys who are coming in this 2026 recruiting class that will sign in December, they finally have that room trending in the direction in which you needed the trend.
Yeah, it wasn't a very for Penn State. You just expected a lot more. It just looked like a hodgepodge.
It really was.
Of guys, yeah. But it does. The one thing that I do notice though is that Wallace and Evans, of course, Evans is basically a big play guy, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was. He was, if he's making plays, it's usually of the big variety. So his average is close to 20. Wallace's average is close to 16. The guys that they're bringing in don't have those types of numbers. Now, maybe that's because of where they were. Is that anything that you've noticed, the team notices, or do they have a couple of those incoming guys specifically targeting, hey, we know this might not have happened with those former teams, but we expect such and such or so-and-so to replace those numbers? Or do you expect this to be a different type of offense where they may suffer a little bit by not having an Amari Evans to go deep with?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. And, if you go back and you watch a lot of Andy Kotelnicki's offenses at Kansas, there wasn't a ton of that truly take the top off the defense wide receiver. It was a lot of, hey, we're going to get you the ball in space and go make plays. And I think that's kind of what they targeted. I mean, we'll get to them obviously here shortly, but Devontae Ross and Trevor Pena especially, I think, are two guys who really fit that mold. And again, I think that might have been some of where the frustration came from on Omari Evans' end as well. Because when he was recruited to Penn State, Mike Yursich was the offense coordinator, and Yursich's offense, was a lot more of push the ball down the field, look for the big chunk play, than Kotelnicki was. And I think that because Kotelnicki's offense gets plenty of chunk plays, we saw it last year. They had like 3 times as many plays of 20-plus yards than they did this season prior. But a lot of Kotelnicki's are going to be from scheming up running lanes, or again, I'm going to get my playmakers the ball in space. He's got to make one guy miss, and then he's gone. Not 30, 40 yards down the field, dropping it in. So I think that may have been part of it there with Evans. But yeah, I don't think that's a concern on the staff's part. And if anything, I think, again, these receivers they brought in, especially Ross and Pena, I think kind of fit what they want to do a little bit better.
Prabula's gone, and he did what he needed to do, but he decided, I don't know how many more years he has left. I don't know if he would have had another year after 2025, because
he'll be a redshirt junior this year.
Okay, so he would have had it if he wanted it, which he probably need it. He's not. I don't think he's an NFL guy, but who knows? And then that means Drew would have been gone, and a job could have been there unless he saw the writing on the wall and knew that there was a young kid that was going to take over no matter what. Is that the case?
I think it's a little bit of both. One, like you said, he wants to play, right? He was a big part of Penn State's offense last year. No matter what any Penn State fan, Penn State fans should have anything but good things to say about Beau Pribula. You can be as upset as you want that he left before the playoffs started. When Drew Adler gets hurt right before halftime against Wisconsin, if Beau Pribula does not play as well as he did in the second half, they don't win that game. And they wound up winning it comfortably because he struggled on his first series and then settled in and played really well. And you wound up winning by 2 scores in the game. You probably lose without Beau Pribula. So, but I think it was a combination of he wanted to play, who wants to get this tape on film for any shot of playing in the NFL. And, coming behind him, you have Ethan Grunkmeyer, who was a top 100 recruit who the staff absolutely loves. Okay. And I'm not saying Grunkmeyer would have been guaranteed to win the job next year over Pribula by any means, but it wasn't going to be just handed to Pribula.
Okay.
It wasn't a true, like quarterback and wait. Now, without Grunkmeyer there, maybe things change a little bit, where if he would have known, hey, I am just – as long as I stay healthy and do my thing, this is going to be my job. But he was going to have to battle with Ethan Grunkmeyer. Jackson Smolek's another quarterback on the roster the staff likes a lot. So it would have been a true competition. So I think that it was a little bit of both as to why he left.
And then the other name that sticks out to me, for obvious reasons, because you see the R back there, Cam Miller. So, and of course, I knew him anyway, following the team last year, but also Smith Vilbert. Is someone that sticks out. He hasn't signed anywhere. Is he definitely gone?
Yeah, I maybe I'm wrong. I thought he committed to North Carolina. Maybe something fell.
Did he do that recently?
Yeah, that's what I thought I saw, but that was.
As you can see, they haven't updated it here yet. So
that was definitely one that hurt. But I get it. Smith Vilbert's been in college for 6 years now, and he wanted to be somewhere he was going to be guaranteed to start his last year before trying to play in the NFL. He was going to play at Penn State, no doubt about it. He was going to be a key rotational piece on the defensive line, but he was not going to be a starter.
Okay.
So that honestly, of the transfers that left, I would argue Vilbert is the one that hurts the most, just because I mentioned before, and you saw it on the depth chart, there's a lot of young talent on that defensive line, but a lot of inexperience.
Yeah. So
you do have a little bit of concerns about the depth there. Excuse me. So you would have loved to stuff Smith Vilbert, but I don't fault a kid for wanting to be guaranteed to start his last year in college either. And then you mentioned Cam Miller. He's a guy who is, which is unfortunate because he was a really good corner for 3 years, is never going to be remembered fondly because everyone's going to remember the play against Notre Dame when they took the lead back with 5 minutes left or whatever it was, and he slipped and fell in coverage, and Jaden Greathouse had the long touchdown to tie the game, which it's not fair to him to be remembered for that because for 3 years he was a really solid corner for Penn State, made some big plays for them. But, I wish him nothing but the best at Rutgers. I think he'll do really well there and probably parlay that into getting a shot in the NFL next year.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and that was one, too, with Miller. That cornerback room, I think you could argue might be the best one in the Big Ten. And even though he was – even last year as the season went on, his playing time started to dwindle some, and that was definitely I think he saw the writing on the wall. And again, not a knock on him because he's a very good player. It's just that room is very deep and very talented.
Okay, so let's take a look at the transfers coming in. And again, let's keep in mind that out of the transfers that left, the team also lost veteran guys. We'll get into, Warren was the big one. They only lost one key offensive lineman, though, correct? Sal Wormley?
Right. Yeah, that was it. It's wild. I've never seen an offensive line return their entire two deep.
Yeah.
One guy, especially in the transfer portal era. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Obviously, Abdul Carter's major. And then you've got Kobe King and Jalen Reed. So there were some big guys, and we'll talk about some of the guys that will look to replace them. But taking a look at the transfers that are coming in, the key guys coming in, and Campbell, Hudson, Pena, Ross, you see there at the top. Those are definitely the guys to watch. Starting on defense with Campbell, because we were just going over the linebackers before. He had a pretty good year last year at North Carolina, second on the team with 76 tackles, 6.5 sacks as well. Mm-hmm. What kind of a linebacker is he, though? Because I'm looking at a guy with 6.5 sacks. Is he more of an edge pass rush guy, or what is he? What does Penn State want out of him?
Yeah, that's where I'm really intrigued to see this, because especially with the Granville injury now, I think a lot of people wonders, like, do you maybe use Amari Campbell? Because we said earlier, you still have Tony Rojas, you still have Dom DeLuca as your box linebackers. Anthony Specca is a redshirt freshman they're very high on. So you feel pretty good about that situation. Do you maybe look to use Amari Campbell as more of a pass rusher to help make up for some of that, what's going to be lost with Max Granville? And I mean, like you said, 6.5 sacks last year, forced a fumble. I think like 11 or 12 tackles for loss. He's a very disruptive player who can play on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So, and that's one thing with Knowles that he's always kind of been known for, is those creative pass rushing blitz situations, right? I mean, I know they lost the game, but look at the Michigan game last year where the play that looked like was going to swing it for Ohio State, where Jack Sawyer drops back in coverage, has that interception at the goal line, partially because he brings the linebacker off the edge where Sawyer normally be coming from. He's so good at scheming that kind of stuff up. And I'm very intrigued to see if that's what they do with Campbell as much as anything this year. And if you're Amari Campbell, I would think you'd be on board with that, because think about it, in the NFL, there's few better ways to make money than the ability to go rush the quarterback. So if you can show the ability to rush the quarterback in the Big Ten, even if from a stand-up linebacker position, in a year or two, an NFL team will gladly pay you money to come do that.
And then you've got those three receivers there. So these are the top, the new receiving group here of Hudson, Pena, and Ross. And Hudson last year, 38, 462, 3, 12.1 average. The best size out of the group. So they did get somebody with a little bit of size. That was something I was, maybe a little concerned with originally, because Pena 5'10", 186, Ross just 5'11", 160. But Ross is one of those guys, again, as you mentioned, and Pena, that get them in space, and that's what they do best. Ross went over 1,000 yards last season with McCord at quarterback, a 13.7 average. Excuse me, I was with Troy. Pena had a big year with McCord, 941, 9 touchdowns, 84 receptions. And also both guys can return kicks. How do you think this is going to go down? Do you think it's possible that they're all going to get their equal share? They're all going to be, doing their own thing? Or do you just best guess, again, with no Warren, and Dinkins is now going to have to step up. But how do you see Drew? Knowing Drew, do you think he might have a favorite here?
I think a lot of it's going to depend on the situation. If Kyron Hudson, you mentioned the size there, which that's something this receiver room has lacked for a few years now. And by all accounts, he has kind of really taken over as the leader of that room, the leader of that group. I mean, he was a team captain at USC, so you probably shouldn't be surprised that he stepped into Penn State and was acting like a team captain. And I think he's going to be your, hey, third down, we got to move the sticks, red zone, tough contested catches. He's your guy. I think Drew is going to feel very comfortable with him. There's been videos from not long after the time Hudson entered the portal and committed to Penn State of him and Drew working out together. They seem to have really established a good connection. So I think he's going to be big. Again, third down, hey, we need 6 yards to move the sticks. We're in the red zone. It's going to be a tough catch in the end zone. Hudson's going to be our guy. Ross and Pena, I'm really intrigued by, especially Ross. I mean, I think Trevor Pena gets a lot of the headlines because he had that huge season at Syracuse. And when he entered the portal, Fran Brown made the comments about the money he wanted, and the amount of money Fran Brown claimed Trevor Pena was looking for is not even remotely close to what he got or being true. But I also understand Fran Brown's end, that's that's a win-win for him because he comes out and he can say, hey, we want guys that want to be here and we're not going to break the bank. And, I get what Fran Brown was doing, but I don't expect Pena to put up the numbers he did last year. I mean, Syracuse threw the ball more than any other team in the country by a wide margin.
Yeah.
So I think
a completely different offense here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing Penn State fans need to temper the expectations. Trevor Pena can put up, 30% of the stats he did last year and be massive for this offense. Because 30% of what Trevor Pena did last year, if Penn State would have had that, they probably would have been in the national championship game. Right, because against Notre Dame, the receivers literally did not have a single catch. So it wouldn't have taken much better receiver play to win that game probably. So I think Payne is going to be one of those guys who, and Ross as well, I've made this comparison before to when Mitchell Tinsley transferred to Penn State from Western Kentucky before 2022. And in 2021 at Western Kentucky, I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but Tinsley just put up, it was similar to Pena. Like it was something like 80 catches for 1,300 yards. And all of this, he's coming in and you're thinking, oh, wow, he's going to completely transform this receiver room at Penn State. And he didn't put up anywhere near the numbers he did when he was at Western Kentucky. But his 1 year at Penn State, he caught 51 balls for about 600 yards, had 7 or 8 scores, just a really solid kind of number 2, number 3 receiver, something, again, they've really lacked the last 2 years. So I think if you get something like that out of Pena and Ross, you're going to feel very happy about it. And you mentioned the punt returning. The last couple of years, punt returning has been a disaster for Penn State. They've left so many yards on the field by just having, and I think some of this, they didn't feel comfortable in their return options of, guys go out there, fair catch the ball. And it was such a big dip down too, because 2 years ago, Daquan Hardy was an All-American punt return. He had like 4 punt return touchdowns in 2023. So I'm really excited to see Ross back there as the punt returner as well. And I think one thing with Ross that is, and should be encouraging, is yes, his stats were at Troy, but they played Iowa last year.
Oh, yeah.
And Iowa was always a good defense, and Ross tore them up. He had a punt return touchdown, caught 2 touchdowns, had like 200 yards of total offense. So, again, he's proven he can do it against, not just against Big Ten competition, but against, traditionally one of the best Big Tens one of the best defenses, in the Big Ten. So
reminds me of Tez Johnson in a way,
and they're both from Troy. So that comparison definitely has been made a lot between the two. And I don't think it's totally unfair. Cause I mean, obviously if you get Tez Johnson out of him, you're going to be ecstatic. But I think again, those 3 guys, if you can get 500-600 yards, 10 to 15 touchdowns total between them. But the biggest thing is just having that guy who can consistently catch the ball and move the sticks when you need it. Yep. Because that's something they haven't had a lot of the last 2 years. And if they would have had that against Notre Dame last year, probably playing for a national championship. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I think the running backs are going to be used a lot more in the pass game this year as well. And even at tight end, I mean, we'll get to it with tight end. They're still, even with Tyler Warren gone, and again, we'll get there. They're still so freaking deep at tight end that I think
Penn State. Come on.
I don't think you're going to have somewhat of a drop off because Tyler Warren was, legitimately one of the best players in program history.
Yeah,
but it's not going to be what people are expecting.
Okay, so and the good thing too is all these receivers are all vets. So by the way, are they all exhausting their eligibility this year?
They are, and again with the vet thing, I think it's important. Kyron Hudson has an entire season in the Big Ten under his belt. And I don't think you can overstate how important that is.
Yep. Okay. So let's now talk about the recruiting class. And with the recruiting class, they were, as far as rivals is concerned, they were 16th, which for Penn State, you want to be better than that. No 5 stars, 12 4 stars. So taking a look at how it all went down, regarding the top guys from top to bottom. Let me see, pop that in there. Okay, so you mentioned Hayes. So you got Hayes and Coleman. They got the 2 running backs. They had a couple of tight ends, a couple of linebackers, a couple of DBs, and then but mostly a lot of a lot. There wasn't really anything that they just centered on as far as the 4-star guys. Typical Penn State, you get the tight ends, you get the linebackers and so forth, and the running backs. So no quarterback up there though, but you said they've already got one. Okay. So talk about that running back room first. Is that really where you think it is the top of this class, or is there another player or group that you think is better than the running backs?
Yeah, I mean, the running backs are very good. I mean, again, Tyke Hayes from Aliquippa, one of the best high school programs, not just in Pennsylvania, but probably in the eastern part of the country. And then you signed Jabir Coleman, a kid from Philadelphia from Imhotep Charter, which, again, really, really good program. But I think you look at the group, you look at the class as a whole, defensive end, I think this defensive end class could be pretty special. We've already mentioned Yvonne Kemajo, who's going to play this year. Chaz Coleman, how Ohio State let that kid get out of the state of Ohio, I have no idea. I think when it's all said and done, Coleman will be the best player in this class. Like, I think you're talking first round defensive end guy down the road, just insanely explosive. Really came on strong with his senior year. Ohio State made a late run at him, but it was more of, hey, Penn State believed in me first, I'm sticking with him type of deal.
Are you surprised he's only a 3-star?
Yes, I am. I am very surprised. And now, again, I think part of it, he was a late riser. His senior year, he really exploded.
Where is he going to play?
Defensive end.
Defensive end.
The kid is so freaking explosive. And then you have, he was a 2026 kid originally who reclassified 2025, Daniel Jennings from West Virginia, who was shaping up to be one of the best players of how the staff feels about him in their 2026 class, who's also going to play defensive end. And then LeVar Arrington Jr. as well. Like, I mean, obviously the kid's going to have all the pressure in the world, but the early returns on LeVar Jr. have been very good. And I think that, again, this defensive end class could be very special. I'm also really high on the wide receiver class they signed, which, I mean, again, they need it badly. Kobe Howard and Matt Alton are two guys who could potentially play this year at wide receiver as true freshmen. And they also signed Lyric Samuel and Jeff Exner, two other guys who some sites had them as 4 stars, some as 3. But I think they signed a really good wide receiver class as well, which, again, is very important for the current state of this roster.
So Kobe Howard, he's the top guy, right?
Yeah, he's a kid who, and I think what really excites you about Howard, if you're Penn State, the summer before his junior year, he came up to Penn State from Florida, worked out for the staff. They liked him. They loved his size, but they weren't sold on the athletic ability. Well, this past summer, then he comes back, works out again. He shaved like 0.2 of a second off his 40 time. Played this previous year at Chaminade Madonna in Florida, which is one of the top schools in the state of Florida, put up really big numbers before getting hurt. So you saw his athletic numbers improve, which I think it's always telling when a kid, like, he was really interested in Penn State, Florida State, but all three of them are kind of leery on the athletic numbers. So when a kid pushes himself to get better instead of just settling for another option, and then to put up numbers playing the kind of schedule Chaminade Madonna plays, I think those things are very telling. So I don't know how much of Howard we see this year. He's going to play some, even if it's just a 4-game limit to preserve the red shirt. But that's definitely a name in that receiver room to stash away for down the road. And Matt Alton as well. Kid from Virginia, originally committed to Virginia Tech. Penn State flipped him late. Similarities between him and the Tyler Warren recruitment. Really quiet kid. Doesn't talk much, plays at a small school in Virginia, originally committed to Virginia Tech before flipping to Penn State. And I think Alton could be a real game breaker for them in a year or two. He's going to need a year or two in the strength conditioning program to kind of add to the body and whatnot. But I think Matthew Alton can be a real game breaker receiver for them a year or two down the road.
Okay. So for year one, give me the players that you think have the best chance of contributing.
Again, we already mentioned Kemajo. He's going to play defensive end.
Okay.
We're going to play him without the Granville injury. Now he definitely will.
Okay.
Like I said, I expect Howard to at least get his 4 games at receiver. Tyke Hayes, same boat. He's going to play at least his 4 games. I don't see any way they burn his red shirt unless you have a ton of injuries at running back because it's so deep on the roster already. But definitely name to watch. Andrew Olish is one I'm very intrigued by. The tight end from Pennsylvania. They flipped him very late in the cycle from Michigan. Some sites had him as a 5-star, and he was borderline 5-star at Rivals. A lot of similarities between him and Luke Reynolds, who's a kid who's going to have a big year for him at tight end this year, I think. And where if the tight end room wasn't as deep as it is, you'd already have him as green light probably. But because there's a lot of depth there, you may not need him. But he's a kid who just may force his way onto the field potentially because of his athletic ability, even if it's just on special teams. And I think one other name to kind of store away potentially is Darius Dixon, a cornerback from California from Mater Dei. Mater Dei, again, one of the top programs in the country, 4-star kid who has come in. He was enrolled in January and just took to the weight program, took to the off-season workouts, which kind of expect for a kid from Mater Dei. But, and he, by the end of spring, was quickly climbing that depth chart at corner. So, again, that's a really deep room, a lot of talent there. So I don't know that he plays, But this is something we've seen James do in the past. A kid like that who's borderline green light, but you're from pretty far away, you burn the red shirt because if nothing else, hey, we're going to have you all over special teams, keep you engaged so you don't feel like transferring home in the offseason because the next year we're going to be in a big role on defense.
Yeah.
So Dixon's a kid who I wouldn't be surprised to see him burn his red shirt, even if it's primarily just on special teams, because he's a great athlete who can help the special teams unit a lot. And again, can get some valuable reps late in games at cornerback for next year and beyond when he's going to have a bigger role.
And what's interesting too is that with that cupcake September, August, September, some of these guys might get some playing time there.
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys, you're going to see them have 3 of their 4 games burned by September.
And if they stick out and they, hey, you know what? These guys are the real deal. We're going to need to burn it. Then they burn it.
And that's what you want as a coaching staff too, because then if you get into October and November and you need these guys, hey, you got a ton of experience earlier in the year. Yeah, it's a lot different having to go in Big Ten play than against those 3, but you're not being thrown completely to the fire. They're not.